Ethiopia is not just a country. It's a time capsule of human history hidden in our very DNA. Imagine if the secrets of where we came from, how we evolved, and even why we look the way we do were encoded in the genes of an ancient civilization. Now, what if I told you that a single discovery shattered everything we thought we knew about human migration? This isn't science fiction. This is the reality of Ethiopian DNA. For years, scientists believed they had mapped out the origins of humanity. The story was simple. Modern humans evolved in Africa, left around 70,000 years ago, spread across the world, and never looked back. But then came a shocking revelation. In a dark cave in Ethiopia, hidden for 4,500 years, lay the remains of a man who would rewrite history. His name? Moda. His DNA was perfectly preserved in the cold, high-altitude cave where he was buried. And when scientists sequenced it, they found something astonishing. Moda carried no Eurasian genetic influence. That might not sound shocking at first, but here's why it matters. Today, many East Africans, especially in Ethiopia, carry 30 to 50% Eurasian DNA. This means that at some point after Moda's time, there was a massive influx of people from the Middle East into Africa, mixing with the local populations. But here's where it gets even crazier. These weren't just traders or travelers passing through. They fundamentally reshaped the genetic makeup of an entire region, leaving their imprint on millions of people today. And if this migration was so massive, why didn't we know about it before? The answer lies in how we study history. Until recently, scientists could only compare the DNA of living populations, trying to piece together migration patterns based on genetic similarities. But that method had a flaw. It assumed that the people in Africa today had always had the same genetic makeup. Moda's DNA proved that wasn't true. It showed a purely African genetic lineage that no longer exists in its original form. This single discovery forced researchers to reconsider everything. But this isn't just about history. It's about identity. Every Ethiopian, every East African, and in some ways, every human on Earth carries a story in their DNA. The genetic journey of Ethiopians reveals ancient adaptations to high altitudes, the struggle against deadly diseases, and even how their ancestors processed food. This isn't just science. It's the key to understanding how we became who we are today. And this is just the beginning. The secrets of Ethiopian DNA are far from fully uncovered. What if even older genomes are waiting to be discovered? What if new evidence completely changes our understanding of human migration again? What does that mean for all of us? For centuries, Ethiopia has been a land of mystery, its ancient landscapes holding secrets that scientists are only now beginning to uncover. But the biggest revelation isn't buried in ruins or lost in ancient texts. It's hidden in the very DNA of its people. Ethiopian genetics tell a story unlike any other on Earth. A story that challenges everything we thought we knew about human history, migration, and evolution. At the heart of this discovery is something remarkable. Ethiopians possess one of the most diverse genetic pools in the world. To put it simply, the DNA of an Ethiopian holds more variety than that of an entire continent. But why? What makes Ethiopia so unique? The answer lies in its past. Ethiopia is not just any country. It's one of the oldest continuous human settlements on Earth. It is the land where some of the earliest modern humans walked, where civilizations rose and fell, and where cultures blended long before recorded history. But it's not just about history, it's about survival. Ethiopian DNA carries the imprints of thousands of years of adaptation, shaping everything from disease resistance to altitude tolerance. This genetic diversity isn't random. It's proof of natural selection at work, refining the human genome for survival in one of the most geographically and climatically diverse regions in the world. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Ethiopian DNA doesn't just hold the story of Africa. It holds the footprints of ancient migrations that connect Africa to the rest of the world. Studies have revealed that Ethiopia played a critical role as a gateway in human migrations, influencing populations far beyond its borders. Some of the genetic markers found in Ethiopians today can be traced back to groups that traveled to Europe, the Middle East, and even Asia tens of thousands of years ago. In a way, Ethiopian DNA is a living archive of the human journey, holding clues that link us all together. And yet, despite its immense importance, Ethiopian genetics have been severely under-researched compared to populations in Europe and Asia. This means there are still countless secrets waiting to be uncovered. What hidden chapters of human history are still locked within the DNA of this ancient land? What new revelations could completely change our understanding of ancestry and evolution? Ethiopian DNA is like an ancient puzzle, and every piece reveals something extraordinary about the origins of modern humans. But here's the twist. This genetic map isn't just old. It's also filled with traces of migrations that changed the course of human history. Ethiopia wasn't just a home for early humans. It was a crossroads where different genetic lineages met, mixed, and evolved. One of the most fascinating discoveries in recent years came from the 4,500-year-old remains found in Mota Cave. This was no ordinary find. This was the first fully sequenced ancient African genome, preserved against all odds in the highland cold. When scientists compared Mota's DNA to modern populations, the results were shocking. Unlike present-day Ethiopians, Moda had zero Eurasian ancestry. This meant one thing: the genetic imprint of Middle Eastern farmers, which is seen in many Ethiopians today, arrived much later than previously thought. But how far did this genetic mixing go? Much farther than anyone expected. It turns out that West Eurasian migrants, arriving around 3,000 years ago, didn't just settle in the Horn of Africa. They spread their DNA across the continent. Even populations in West and South Africa carry small traces of this genetic signal, reshaping what we know about Africa's deep ancestry. Yet, Ethiopia's story isn't just about external influences. It's also about continuity. Some Ethiopian populations today still carry genetic markers that stretch back tens of thousands of years, unchanged. This means they are living genetic time capsules, preserving ancient African lineages that existed before any migrations took place. Ethiopia's position as both a genetic bridge and a guardian of ancient DNA makes it one of the most important keys to decoding the human past. What other lost histories are hidden within its genetic makeup? How many more secrets about human evolution are waiting to be revealed? Ethiopian DNA doesn't just tell a story. It challenges everything we thought we knew about human ancestry. For years, scientists believed in a simple timeline. Early humans evolved in Africa, migrated out, and spread across the world. But Ethiopia's genetic blueprint has revealed a much more complex reality, one that rewrites history. One of the most unexpected findings is the presence of an ancient genetic signature that links Ethiopia to populations far beyond Africa. Traces of DNA in Ethiopian genomes connect them not only to early African hunter-gatherers, but also to groups in the Middle East, India, and even parts of southern Europe. How did these connections form? The answer lies in waves of migration, some known, others still shrouded in mystery. One major migration event occurred around 3,000 years ago, when a group of West Eurasian farmers moved into the Horn of Africa. But this wasn't a minor event. It left a permanent genetic imprint on Ethiopian populations, altering their DNA in ways that can still be measured today. Some Ethiopian groups absorbed as much as 30 to 40% of this incoming ancestry, while others remained more genetically isolated, preserving deeply African lineages that stretch back over 50,000 years. But the movement of people didn't stop there. Evidence suggests earlier connections between Ethiopia and populations in the Arabian Peninsula and South Asia, dating back much further. These links could explain why some Ethiopian genetic markers are found in unexpected places, like India's Dravidian populations or among ancient Middle Eastern communities. Each new study uncovers a layer of forgotten history, proving that Ethiopia was never a genetic island. It was a hub of human movement, interaction, and adaptation. But if so many connections exist, what other migrations are still undiscovered? What hidden journeys remain buried in Ethiopia's genetic code? Ethiopia's DNA holds a unique blend of genetic markers that reveal an extraordinary history of adaptation. Unlike many populations whose genetic makeup remains relatively stable over time, Ethiopians carry signatures of selective pressures that have shaped their survival in some of the most diverse environments on Earth. One of the most striking genetic adaptations in Ethiopian populations is their ability to thrive at high altitudes. People living in the Ethiopian highlands, thousands of meters above sea level, have developed specialized physiological traits that allow them to survive where oxygen levels are dangerously low. Unlike Tibetans, who rely on increased red blood cell production, Ethiopians have a different genetic solution, one that scientists are still working to fully understand. But altitude isn't the only challenge Ethiopian DNA has responded to. Skin pigmentation genes show distinct evolutionary pathways, shaped by exposure to intense ultraviolet radiation. Variants in genes like BNC2 and UVRAG, linked to skin protection and DNA repair, suggest that Ethiopian populations underwent strong natural selection to maintain a balance between folate preservation and vitamin D synthesis. Even more fascinating is the genetic resistance to diseases. Ethiopia's long history of exposure to pathogens has left behind genetic markers that suggest a battle for survival against infectious diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. Genes like MRC1 and IFNA, which regulate immune responses, show clear signs of selection, hinting that Ethiopian populations had to develop stronger immune defenses than many other groups. Every genetic adaptation found in Ethiopia tells a story of survival and resilience. From oxygen regulation to immune strength, these adaptations are living proof of how the human genome can evolve in response to environmental pressures. But what other hidden traits remain undiscovered? What secrets are still buried in the DNA of Ethiopia's people? Ethiopia's genetic makeup reveals a fascinating history of migration and intermixing that reshaped not only its people, but also left a mark on populations across Africa and beyond. For thousands of years, this land has been a crossroads, where ancient travelers, traders, and settlers left behind traces of their DNA. One of the most significant genetic events in Ethiopian history is the Back to Africa migration, where a group of ancient farmers from the Near East returned to the Horn of Africa around 3,000 years ago. Their arrival wasn't just a cultural shift. It introduced new genetic lineages that are still present in Ethiopian populations today. Studies show that these migrants contributed up to 25 to 30% of the ancestry in some Ethiopian groups, influencing everything from physical traits to disease resistance. But these weren't the only travelers to shape Ethiopia's gene pool. The genetic diversity in Ethiopia is unmatched, even by larger regions of Africa. Some Ethiopian groups show genetic connections to North Africans, Middle Easterners, and even South Asians, suggesting that Ethiopia has long been a meeting point of different civilizations. This is reflected in the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA studies, which indicate a complex web of ancient and recent migrations that shaped the population over thousands of years. Even within Ethiopia, different ethno-linguistic groups have their own distinct genetic signatures. Cushitic speakers, Semitic-speaking Highlanders, and Nilotic groups in the West all show varied ancestry patterns, reflecting migrations and interactions that happened at different points in history. Some groups carry deep-rooted African lineages, while others show traces of Eurasian influence, highlighting just how interconnected Ethiopia's past truly is. But what makes Ethiopia's genetic history even more remarkable is its role in the broader African story. Some of the DNA markers found in Ethiopians today appear in populations as far away as southern Africa, hinting at ancient gene flow between distant regions. These findings challenge the traditional view that African populations remained isolated from one another, proving that movement and interaction were always part of human history. Ethiopia's DNA is more than just a record of its own past. It's a key to understanding how people moved, mixed, and adapted across entire continents. And with more ancient DNA discoveries yet to be made, the full story of Ethiopia's genetic legacy is only beginning to unfold. Ethiopia's genetic history is full of surprises, but one of the most unexpected discoveries comes from ancient DNA. In a highland cave called Moda, scientists uncovered the first-ever fully sequenced genome from ancient Africa, belonging to a man who lived 4,500 years ago. His DNA provides a rare and untouched snapshot of what the genetic landscape of Ethiopia looked like before major migrations reshaped the region. Moda's genome revealed that he had 0 traces of Eurasian ancestry, meaning the large-scale migration of Near Eastern farmers into Africa hadn't yet happened. This was a game-changer. Before this discovery, scientists had only been able to estimate ancient African ancestry by studying modern populations. But Moda's DNA gave researchers a direct, unaltered reference point, a crucial missing piece in reconstructing Africa's past. By comparing Mota's DNA to present-day Ethiopian groups, researchers found something even more astonishing. A significant portion of his genetic makeup closely matched the Ari people of southern Ethiopia. This suggests that despite thousands of years of migration and mixing, some Ethiopian populations have preserved deep ancestral connections to the people who lived in the region millennia ago. But Mota's genome didn't just clarify the past, it raised new questions. When scientists used his DNA to model later migrations, they found that the Near Eastern backflow into Africa reached much deeper than expected. Not only did these Eurasian migrants settle in the Horn of Africa, but their DNA spread across other parts of the continent, reaching as far as West and Southern Africa. This means that some genetic traits found in populations far beyond Ethiopia can be traced back to this migration event. Another fascinating discovery was that Moda lacked genetic adaptations for digesting milk, a key trait that many Ethiopian groups carry today. This suggests that lactase persistence evolved after his time, likely introduced by incoming pastoralist populations. However, he did have genetic adaptations for living at high altitudes, proving that some traits associated with Ethiopian highlanders today have existed for thousands of years. Mota's DNA changed how we understand Africa's genetic history. It confirmed that migrations reshaped the continent far more than we once believed, but also that some deep ancestral roots remain intact in Ethiopia today. And as more ancient DNA samples are discovered, who knows what other secrets might still be hidden beneath Ethiopia's soil? Ethiopia's genetic past is more complex than a simple story of migrations and mixing. Some of the most intriguing findings come from the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, two genetic markers that reveal the separate journeys of male and female ancestry. These markers have helped scientists uncover a unique pattern of inheritance in Ethiopia, one that doesn't quite match what we see in most other populations. Let's start with mtDNA, which is passed down exclusively from mothers to their children. Ethiopian mtDNA tells a fascinating story. A large portion of it belongs to haplogroups that are deeply rooted in Africa, but there are also clear signs of ancient connections to populations beyond the continent. Some Ethiopian lineages link back to the first humans who left Africa tens of thousands of years ago, and then, in a surprising twist, some of their descendants came back thousands of years later, leaving traces of Eurasian maternal ancestry. But the Y chromosome, which is inherited only from fathers, paints a slightly different picture. Unlike mtDNA, a significant percentage of Ethiopian Y chromosomes have clear links to populations outside Africa, especially to regions of the Middle East. This suggests that, at some point in history, there was a major influx of males from Eurasia, likely during migration waves linked to the spread of agriculture and trade. The contrast between mtDNA and Y chromosome data suggests something striking. The ancient migrations into Ethiopia were not gender-balanced. Instead, the genetic evidence points to a male-dominated migration from West Eurasia into Ethiopia, while African maternal lineages remained largely preserved. This kind of asymmetry isn't unusual in human history, but in Ethiopia, it has created a genetic profile unlike anywhere else in the world. Another unique aspect of Ethiopian genetic inheritance is the presence of haplogroups that are incredibly rare or even absent in the rest of Africa. Some of these lineages may represent ancient population structures that existed long before major migrations reshaped the region. Others hint at early connections between Ethiopia and neighboring civilizations, such as those in the Arabian Peninsula and even further into Asia. This complex web of ancestry, where maternal and paternal lineages tell overlapping but distinct stories, is part of what makes Ethiopian DNA so remarkable. It shows us that while migration, trade, and cultural exchange shaped Ethiopia's history, deep ancestral roots remained intact, carried through generations by unique patterns of inheritance. One of the most fascinating aspects of Ethiopian genetics is how it has preserved ancient DNA signatures while adapting to extreme environments. From the thin air of the highlands to the scorching heat of the lowlands, Ethiopian populations have evolved genetic traits that help them survive where others might struggle. One of the most well-studied adaptations is high-altitude survival. The Ethiopian highlands rise more than 8,000 feet above sea level, where oxygen levels are significantly lower than at sea level. Unlike Andean and Tibetan populations, which develop genetic responses that increase oxygen transport in the blood, Ethiopians seem to have evolved a completely unique mechanism. Studies show that they maintain normal hemoglobin levels, yet somehow still function efficiently in low oxygen conditions. Scientists believe that a combination of gene variations affecting cardiovascular function and oxygen use at the cellular level has helped them thrive in such an extreme environment. Meanwhile, in the lowlands, another genetic challenge emerges: intense heat and UV radiation. Ethiopia's location near the equator means that many of its populations have been exposed to some of the highest levels of ultraviolet radiation for thousands of years. This prolonged exposure has shaped skin pigmentation genes, ensuring that melanin levels provide protection against UV damage while also balancing the body's need for vitamin D production. But there's another layer to this adaptation: genetic changes related to folate metabolism. High UV exposure can degrade folate, which is essential for DNA repair and reproduction. The strong selection for genes that regulate folate levels suggests an evolutionary response to this environmental pressure. Beyond altitude and UV resistance, Ethiopian populations also show immune system adaptations that reflect their long history of exposure to infectious diseases. Certain genetic variations found in Ethiopians enhance resistance to malaria and tuberculosis, two of the deadliest diseases in African history. Some of these genetic adaptations involve modifications in red blood cell structure that make it harder for malaria parasites to thrive. Others involve genes that regulate immune responses, ensuring that the body can fight off infections without overreacting and causing harmful inflammation. Another intriguing adaptation is lactase persistence, the ability to digest milk into adulthood. While this trait is common in many pastoralist communities worldwide, Ethiopian populations have multiple genetic variations that enable it. This suggests that the trait may have evolved independently in different groups, rather than spreading from a single mutation, as seen in European populations. Ethiopian DNA is a testament to the power of natural selection. Rather than a single, uniform response to the environment, their genetic landscape reflects a mosaic of adaptations, each tailored to different ecological challenges. These adaptations not only highlight human resilience, but also offer insights into genetics that could have implications for medicine and health worldwide. Ethiopian DNA doesn't just reveal the past. It holds clues that could redefine the future of medicine and genetics. With such a vast genetic diversity and unique adaptations, studying Ethiopian populations could unlock breakthroughs that benefit people worldwide. One of the most promising areas of research is disease resistance. Ethiopian populations show genetic variations that enhance immune responses to infections, especially those caused by bacteria and viruses. Some of these genes regulate how the immune system identifies and attacks pathogens, while others influence inflammation control, reducing the risk of excessive immune reactions that can cause serious health complications. Understanding these genetic factors could lead to better treatments for infectious diseases like tuberculosis and malaria, which remain global health threats. Another area of interest is cardiovascular health. Some Ethiopian groups, particularly those living at high altitudes, have developed unique heart and lung functions that allow them to thrive in low-oxygen environments. Scientists believe that studying these adaptations could help develop treatments for hypoxia-related conditions, such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and high-altitude sickness. These findings could be life-changing for millions of patients worldwide. Ethiopian DNA also offers insights into metabolism and nutrition-related genetics. Many populations in Ethiopia have genetic adaptations related to lactose digestion, folate processing, and energy metabolism. For instance, certain Ethiopian groups show distinctive genetic signatures that allow them to efficiently process nutrients in low-calorie or high-starch diets. This research could improve personalized nutrition plans and help combat global health issues like diabetes and obesity. One of the most surprising discoveries is genetic influence on skin health and UV protection. Ethiopians have developed multiple pathways for protecting their skin from extreme UV radiation, not just through melanin production, but also through enhanced DNA repair mechanisms. Understanding these protective genetic traits might lead to advancements in skin cancer prevention and better treatments for UV-related conditions. But perhaps the most exciting potential lies in pharmacogenetics, the study of how genes influence individual responses to medications. Ethiopian populations have unique genetic variations in enzymes that break down drugs, meaning that certain medications may be more or less effective for them compared to other populations. Identifying these genetic factors could lead to better, more personalized treatments, reducing the risk of adverse drug reactions and improving overall healthcare outcomes. Ethiopian DNA is not just a window into the past, it's a blueprint for the future. By studying these unique genetic signatures, scientists can develop life-saving treatments, improve global health, and even unlock new possibilities in human evolution. The answers hidden in Ethiopian genes could one day revolutionize medicine as we know it.